Howdy and welcome to the Growing the Next Version of You show. My name is Mike Rochelle. I'm a strategic influencer who collects meaningful relationships, actionable philosophies, and methods to help people and organizations refine their purpose for results growth. Every week, I chat with thought leaders as we explore leadership as a mind, body, and spirit, yes, an inside-out experience that helps us grow and make the world a better place. Join me. You've heard Brad. I think 2 weeks from now, Charles Crouch comes. This is Fanny Dunnigan.
I did, definitely.
Charles is the Navy SEAL that we talked about. Your maiden name was Crouch?
He's a relative.
Okay. Very good. Well, it's a pleasure to have you here, Belinda. I'm looking forward to getting into our history together because Paul and Michael and Erica and our whole family has been blessed by your activities in the community over the years. I'm going to read your bio, then I'm going to ask you to kind of go into who you are from a mind, body, spirit perspective. We'll talk through some topics that we've already kind of rearranged, but we haven't talked about them because I want it to be a lively conversation.
Sure.
We're going to then go to the Daughters of the American Revolution. Just found out that you're a great-granddaughter of Davy Crockett.
Daniel Boone.
Daniel Boone. Sorry. I knew I was going to get it wrong, but that's exciting. So that's the reason for you to stay and listen to the whole show.
There you go.
To hear that story. So let's go with your bio. So Belinda has been married to David Nikkel for 41 years. She has 2 daughters, Candace Moody and Courtney Nichols. They have given them 2 fine son-in-laws, Heath Moody and Robert Nichols, as well as 4 wonderful grandchildren. Ty Moody, 12, Tatum Moody, 9, Liney Nichols, is that the right name? Lindley, sorry. Nichols, 5, and Colton Nichols, 2. They've lived in Colleyville, Texas for 27 years, where they're a member of the Compass Christian Church. They are lifelong supporters of the University of Oklahoma, and if you're on Facebook with her, you'll know that that's true beyond a shadow of a doubt. Supporting the OU Club of Fort Worth, as well as maintaining our football season tickets. During our retirement years, our focus is now on supporting our grandchildren in their various sporting events. We've become big South Lake Dragon fans. Yeah, that's great. Currently, she's involved with the Colleyville Garden Club and served as president from 2021 to 2022. She serves on District 2 Board of Directors for the Texas Garden Clubs and is also a member of the South Lake PEO chapter. What is PEO?
It's a philanthropic education organization. We give out scholarships.
Awesome. As well as becoming a member of the Grapevine DAR, which is the Daughters of the American Revolution chapter, being the great-granddaughter times 6 of the patriot Daniel Boone. That's awesome. Now, what I didn't say is I'm going to look at your resume too, because that is impressive. A gentleman doesn't ask a lady how old they are, but I'm fairly certain that you're around 10 years older than me, just given the times we graduated from college and things like that. Belinda, when I met her, was the principal at Heritage Elementary, and I'll get into that in a minute. But before that, she was the assistant principal at Heritage Elementary and had an educational background all the way back into Tulsa, where you were a principal at an elementary school there, taught as an adjunct professor at Oral Roberts, many other things. She actually worked her way through college as an assistant bookkeeper. That was an interesting thing. And you were a science teacher.
Yes.
Which now makes sense because when I came to you and said, hey, I've got this cool thing from Microsoft called the Worldwide Telescope.
It was awesome.
She invited me in. And I think for 6 or 7 years, I went there every year during the phases of the moon and taught everybody how to use the telescope. Today, I'm going to walk you through a process about how to create something from nothing in the world. And I'm going to do it with a story from when my wife and I moved from Pasadena, California to Highland Village, Texas back in the year 2000. Prior to that, I had been a divisional CIO at C. Richard Ellis for about 6 years and had the opportunity in Pasadena to use some of the bike trails and things we had there. Also traveled up to Microsoft to service my client who was using several of the software products that we had created at C. Richard Ellis to manage their properties globally. And in that, we would stay in, and often we would use bikes to ride the trails from Bellevue, Washington to Redmond.
and it was a blast, and I really enjoyed those trails. So when I moved to Dallas, I thought, well, maybe this new neighborhood we're going into would have that. Well, we did. So started creating this vision of what it would be like to have bike lanes and trails, not only on the city streets, but in the byways and even around the lake. And found some like-minded people at the Highland Village Parks Foundation, and we created the trail system here in Highland Village from year 2000 to about 2010. They're still building trails and things around the city, so it's an ongoing process. But I want to use that as a way to show you how to bring great things into being. The first step is to visualize. What you have to do here is define what it is that you want. You need to be able to define it in such a way in your mind's eye that you can feel it, that you can see it, that you can experience it, so that you can bring it into the present.
She also is a consummate gatherer of talent in the community. So that's kind of fun. Science instructor at Oklahoma State Department of Education, then Heritage, then Capel Middle School, and then a principal at Heritage. But it didn't stop there. She continued at LASD after she completed her run of 12 years at Heritage as an administrative substitute for LASD for various elementary schools, and also interim director of support staff at LASD. So, and I'm guessing that you're still engaged somehow.
It's nice to be asked to come back.
Yeah.
Even though I've been retired, hard to believe, for 12 years, I've been asked to come back 10 times.
That's awesome.
So that's awesome.
That's very good. Yeah. So, and why? Okay. I'm not going to read all of these. I mean, literally, it's a full page of awards. Now, I asked you to do this on purpose because I love to share people with other people.
I had to sweep the dust off of the resume.
Oh my life. I'm going to hit some of the highlights and then we'll go into how I know you. So the highlights are all the way back in 77, you received a Presidential Leadership Award from Washington, D.C., and you were the Oklahoma delegate to D.C. Let's go fast forward. I mean, there's all kinds of commendations from Oklahoma Governor Waters, Board of Directors for District 1 from the OSTA, Oklahoma Science Teachers Association, Union Junior High Teacher of the Year, Principal of the Year, the Quarter, and then in 2001, which is around the time that we were looking, Arlene and I were looking to move from California back to Texas. I'm from Houston originally, she's from Puerto Rico, but we wanted to raise kids here. Started looking around, and the thing that was the most interesting for us in this neighborhood was that the elementary school was a U.S. Blue Ribbon school, but you were also, it was also an individual honor for you as well as for the school. So, and then and even as late as 2009, the LASD Administrator of the Year finalist. So there are honors in professional organizations like TASSP, Region X Assistant Principal of the Year, PTA Honorary Life Member of Texas Congress of PTAs. So the list goes on. There's a whole chapter of things from a community service perspective, with many of the places that we talked about, including the president's role at the Colleyville Garden Club. So, wow, a life well spent and still growing and going. And every year when our kids go back as they're graduating at the Heritage Elementary School, Belinda is there.
That's right.
So you have you ever counted how many kids?
Oh, it's been thousands.
Yeah.
But we started the senior breakfast in 2001. Heritage had that was the year our first group of Heritage fifth graders were going to graduate. And we've done it ever since. And
so you opened the school?
We did. Well, I didn't. I was there the second year.
Okay.
And it was fabulous because the senior breakfast, they come back, it just gets better every year. Yeah. The kids line the halls and clap for the seniors, and the seniors remember, doing that when they were in elementary school for the seniors, and now their seniors coming back. So. Yeah. But it'll be weird next year. This is the last year of my fifth graders when I retired. So I won't know anyone after next year. So that's going to be a different thing.
Yeah, but there's still
my
a,
community, brothers and sisters.
no pun intended, a heritage there
That's right.
that will never really go away. Toby's doing a great job too.
Oh, he's fabulous.
And has he been there 10 years already?
Yes, this is my 11th year of retired, so he's good. He'll surpass me as far as being there's only been 3 principals at Heritage: Mike DeBolt, myself, and Toby. So that's very little turnover in the 20 plus years that Heritage has been a school.
Very good.
25 years now.
So the targeting of this particular neighborhood because of the schools was important to us, and we actually bought property in Copper Canyon for our retirement because we want to stay in this community. Exactly. And Erica still has 3 more years.
That's right.
So we didn't want to take her out.
No.
But that's really because of you.
The first step is to visualize. What you have to do here is define what it is that you want. You need to be able to define it in such a way in your mind's eye that you can feel it, that you can see it, that you can experience it, so that you can bring it into the present. You've got to define your vision so well that you can feel it, you can taste it, you can experience it, you can feel the wind blowing through your hair.
But before we get into that, let's go back to what made you you. You know, what was your background? Obviously, you're from Oklahoma, but what do you want to share about your background and where you came from, including your faith background?
Sure. Gosh, 2 wonderful parents. I hit the lotto with my mom and dad and my sister. Wonderful family. Grew up in the Oklahoma City area. I was the boy my dad never had. I went from the time I was born. I went to all the OU games, not just football, but basketball, baseball, track, wrestling. We supported it all.
Was he a graduate of
No,
as well?
he didn't go there. In fact, both my parents, neither one had a college education. And we knew that education was the key to success. Knew from the day I was born practically that I would be going to OU. And which now we've had like over 20 people from our family, sisters, brothers, brother-in-laws, nieces, nephews, daughters that have all gone to OU.
Think about looking anywhere else?
We tried the brainwashing at a very early age. None of my grandkids will probably go there, but I am brainwashing the best I can. But they really instilled hard work ethics. They both were successful. My mom worked in the 60s when a lot of women didn't. She had a career working for the State Department of Oklahoma. And they really, we just knew that we would be educated. But my sister is also a principal. She's retired as well. And so we have a family of a lot of educators, doctors, lawyers, just a little bit of everything. So. And my parents, we were always Baptist growing up, grew up in a Baptist church. And then for some reason in the 60s, my parents stepped away from the church for a while, and they didn't go back for a long time. And so when David and I got married, we knew something was missing in our marriage. And one of my friends I worked with, Margie Learned, asked us to go to her church, and we went and we fell in love with it. It was a Christian church. And then they separated, and we were one of 10 families that started our own church. And at that time, Jim Baker and Tammy Baker were kind of popular. We had our own church in our school. So Margie and I taught. We rented that on Sundays, and we started our own church. We eventually went to a shopping center, and it instilled a lot that, like, we taught our children, like David and I would have a weekend where we'd have to clean the church, and taking our little girls to go clean the church. And we were all Sunday school teachers. It was fabulous. And by the time we left and were transferred to Dallas in 95, our church had grown to over 200 members.
Nice.
So that was really neat to see that. And so then we joined Compass Christian Church down here, and have enjoyed that. We're not as active as we were years ago. We used to have a lot of different missions that we were in charge of, and we have kind of slacked off a little bit. So that's something that I look for, more spiritual growth.
Yeah. Well, it's a constant.
Oh, it is. It is. I visit the Methodist Church a lot, Whitechapel, and of course, then our own church and it's a great church. It's just so big.
Yeah.
And so we have kind of lost some of the friendships that we had early on when we first were members.
Sure.
Because it's gotten so big.
Yeah. So I share, my parents didn't go to school either. And it was an elder in my church that helped me see a vision more than I had
ever
could think of. Yeah. He's passed away now, but I can't wait to see him again.
Absolutely.
Because there are all kinds of things that I want to ask him.
Absolutely.
You know, that's the kind of relationships that I love to think about. Those that have really poured into you and care for you. Well, that's good. So did you guys move here for David's career? And then that's why you moved to schools? Okay.
It was a corporate transfer, and we had been in Union. That's where we had raised our children. Basically, Candace was a 6th grader. Courtney was a 3rd grader when we got transferred, and we had just built our dream house, and I had been named the principal at Peters Elementary there in Union, the 3rd year there, and worked my way up from, like 6th grade teacher, 8th grade teacher, and they didn't have assistants, so I got to be named a principal. I was an interim for a little bit, and then principal. And it was really tough. I remember my dad asked my husband, he says, "Do you realize what you're asking her to give up?"
Right.
And we really didn't think about that. It was a great opportunity for him, but it was a little scary for me because I didn't have Texas certification, so I had to take my tests again. And I was really fortunate. I took an assistant's job, assistant principal at Heritage, and that was kind of nice. As I had already got Texas certification, and I was able to learn Texas law as an assistant. And Mike DeBolt was great and we had wonderful staff. And it was only its 2nd year in operation. And then I found out that Louisville had a policy on their local board that if you did not live in the district, you couldn't be a principal there. And I lived in Colleyville. And so, that was very, I wasn't going to change my kids' schools after we just bought a house in Colleyville. And so I left and I went to Coppell for 3 years. That's why I went to Coppell. And I got a wonderful call. It was Carla Yoakum who told me that Mr. DeBolt was having some issues, that they were going to reassign him. And Dr. Downing met with the teachers, and they said, "Well, what kind of principal are you looking for?" And they said, "Well, we want Belinda Nikkel back." And so Dr. Downing called Mr. Eccles at Coppell, and they released me from my contract in the middle of the year at Coppell.
Wow.
And I got to come back to Heritage as the principal in 97. That was
so
99.
Did they change the policy to get you back?
He did. Dr. Downing gave the out-of-district residency. Now that it's still on the books, they do like their high school principals to live in the district, which I understand, but they waived it for me. And I was very honored. There was a couple others they ended up waiving it for down the road, but I was so blessed and I was able to come back home. And it was tough that first year. They had like 15 teachers that had resigned, but that ended up being a blessing because then I got to bring in people that I liked. And so it worked out wonderful in that regard. And still a lot of the original. We had hired Mike Klosky that year. And Carla Yoakum
He just retired.
He did. He just retired. And we hired Janelle Dennis that year. So it was really neat to be able to bring in wonderful folks who I feel like are my second family.
Yeah, he actually was the one that started the girls on volleyball. We were talking about that before. My daughter Erica's on the JV team at Marcus High School now. And a lot of the girls that play on that team started out, I think, in 2nd or 3rd grade with Coach Klosky, learning how to play volleyball. And
Wayne Hawks.
And she wasn't into basketball. None of mine were into basketball, but he did an awesome job.
He did.
The cool thing about it is that you built a team, and I think that was part of how you built it into a blue ribbon school. So for those that don't know what that is there like a certification process? What do you have to do? And what is that process? Because it's not common.
It's the highest award any school can receive. It is quite the process. I asked the staff if that's something that they wanted to go after, and they said yes. And we were really blessed. It's the Academy Awards of schools. The President of the United States gives you the award. Usually it was in the Rose Garden where they would present it. And so
Who was president when you got it?
At that time, it was George Bush. And I'll tell you a little story. It happened when we got it right after 9/11. So it changed everything. And what had happened was we had a wonderful nurse, Jill Brown, and she was a really, really gifted writer. And there were 5 a core of 5 of us: Janet Davis, Jill Brown, Phyllis Hamilton, who was a counselor at the time, Sandy Schoen, and myself that were on this, and Janet Davis was on the writing committee. And so it was like we wrote our dissertation. And then you submit it to the United States Department of Education, and then they send a person out to come visit your school to see that, everything that you put on paper on your application was indeed backed up. And so we had a visiting person from San Francisco, and this is where the heritage community just unbelievably came together. We had already started the outdoor classroom, Texas Our Heritage.
Yeah.
And I had a father who owned a cement company, and it was Sidney Spradling's father. And he said, my daughter's a 4th grader, and we were doing it in phase 1, phase 2, because we couldn't afford to do the whole thing.
Sure.
He says, I want that done by the time my daughter is graduated from Heritage.
Wow.
And so he took over. Alex Buck, who is a wonderful pillar of this community, he came to me the first year and said, Ms. Nikkel, you need an awning on the playground for those kids. He built it, no charge. Same thing with the outdoor classroom. He says, I think I can help you there with an outdoor space. And he built the awning out in the outdoor classroom, got all the permits, and he took care of everything. And we would work on weekends to get that outdoor classroom ready, and it was made us very unique. And even my husband, we were out there they would take cinder blocks, and they made the outdoor seating, and they would put flagstone around it. And it's an award-winning, it's the ultimate outdoor classroom. But so the man from California who came and visited couldn't believe that we had all this. But the community, again, all working together. I remember the moms, one was a decorator, and she kind of spruced up our office for us for the visit. And we kept it that way, of course. And then when we won the award, again, the heritage community, unbelievable. Usually it would be the principal and the assistant principal, and maybe the chief writer would go to DC for the ceremony. Well, it was after 9/11, and we were to go to and had tours of the White House. Dick Armey was one of the representatives, and he was the Senate Majority Leader at the time. They all had all of these. They were rolling out the red carpet for us. But I asked the administration if I could take more than 3. And they were like, and I said, I will pay for their substitutes. And he said, yeah, but flying all those people. I said, I've got that covered. And we took 12. Nobody had ever done that. And I took one from every grade level. But the parents, many of them are with the aviation, with American Airlines. Many parents donated their miles, free tickets, and we took all those teachers up there. The PTA sent us a welcome basket. It was Donna Whitwell at the time, her husband and she were executives with Marriott. We got our rooms at the nicest Marriott where the awards were across the street from where the awards were being presented for $35 a night.
The first step is to visualize. What you have to do here is define what it is that you want. You need to be able to define it in such a way in your mind's eye that you can feel it, that you can see it, that you can experience it, so that you can bring it into the present. You've got to define your vision so well that you can feel it, you can taste it, you can experience it, you can feel the wind blowing through your hair. As you get clarity on your vision, you need to start articulating what it is that you want to do and sharing that feeling and that vision with others to see if there's anybody out there that shares it. In our case, it was the city government, but we had a Parks Foundation that had already started planning several years before I got involved.
So everybody had nice rooms, and the PTA had welcome baskets for us when we got there. It was very, very special. And after Janet Davis and I were on the same flight, and we flew in and we went straight to the Pentagon, and you could see where it had been bombed. I mean, where the plane had crashed. It was unbelievable. And then it was just very surreal. So that changed a lot. So George Bush, they canceled all the White House tours from there on. So we didn't get to have it in the Rose Garden. So they did it at the Hilton, and Mrs. Bush came. She was an educator, a librarian, and she gave us the award. But it was very special. We rented a limousine, we took tours, and we had a dinner on the Potomac. It was just a very, very special time for all of us. We accepted that award on behalf of everybody. And so even though you can reapply from every 5 years, once you're a U.S. Blue Ribbon School, you're always a Blue Ribbon School in my book. It was one of our best accomplishments.
So then what, curricula-wise or standards of excellence, what are the categories that you have to?
They look at your percentage of passing rates, even with minorities, with everything.
So it's outcomes.
It is outcomes based, as well as what you're offering your students, like, extracurricular activities. They look at that. Of course, we had a lot of things that the kids could be involved in, from dribbling hawks to the outdoor classroom to Cub Scouts. It was everything. So they looked at some of that, basically how well-rounded you are, and retention rate of your teachers. They looked at everything. They looked at also your experience across the board of your teachers, and the classroom ratio from student to teacher, looked at many, many factors. And so we had many, many files that he was going through, looking at things, and then he writes his recommendation if we should receive the honor or not. So that's how we got there.
Very cool. Well, as I said at the beginning, we chose because of that award, but then the actual experience was phenomenal.
Super.
I mean, my oldest just graduated from Baylor with a microbiology degree.
I love it.
So he's on his path to getting a PhD. And from kindergarten through probably second grade, just about every day when I would drive Michael to the round, you were there, and I would get out of the car and walk towards you. And Michael would grab my leg.
He did.
You would peel him off of me and walk him into the school.
We did. That's how I became friends with the Rochelle family. I loved it. I'll never forget the first day of school for kindergarten for Michael. You were walking him across, and he didn't want to go. And I said, I promise I'll take good care of him. I'll walk him down, because I knew the separation in the classroom would be harder than outside. And so I called you at work, and then I called Arlene, who was in D.C. at the time. And she was with Ernst & Young and worked in D.C. And I said, I promise you, he's doing well. He's not crying anymore, and he's doing good. But it was so hard. And she, and her being out of town and you taking him, but he adapted very beautifully. And I always tell the parents, you have to let us take them, especially if you take them back home on that first day, you lose. It's going to make the second day a lot harder to get them back to school.
So
his teachers won him over quickly.
Fortunately, you didn't have to experience
Paul
that with
and Erica
Paul.
He was
just like running into the school.
It's like, bye, Mom and Dad, see you later. Exactly.
But part of that award too was the team that you built, having the excellence that you have. I tell everybody that's thinking about moving into this neighborhood,
I love it.
The teachers at Heritage are our family. Gina Mitchell, who was your kindergarten teacher, Paul?
I don't know her first name. This is probably a terrible thing for me to say, but it was Miss Larkin.
Yes, Christy Larkin.
Christy Larkin, yeah. So that was
still there. Both of them still there.
But then Miss Yoakum was first grade, right?
Yes.
So she had all three of them.
She did. I remember.
And then who was second grade?
She is not there anymore for me, but I had Miss Hicks.
Yes.
Miss Hicks.
Miss
Okay.
Hicks. Lindsay Hicks.
So then third grade was.
We all had Betty Jackson.
Miss Jackson.
She's one of my best
Jammin'
friends.
Jackson herself.
Jammin' Jackson.
Jammin' Jackson. Yeah.
I couldn't wait to hire her. And, she retired from Oklahoma.
I know.
That was amazing.
Yeah. So the thing about it is that it's like a private school in a public school setting from a quality perspective.
Yes, it is.
And with all the parents involved and everything, it was just a fabulous starting point for our kids. And I think for everybody that's involved. And so we're biased because we're a part of the family, right? But that's a big part of community. And the way that Arlene and I have always looked at it, and I know that this wasn't the experience that you had with all parents, was that we were partners with you in the education of our children. And so it was a great pleasure. So how do you find staff that have that kind of heart too? Because it's not just a job. I mean, it is a calling, right? For the level of teacher that you were able to get there. And many of them completed their entire process and have retired.
Well, it is tough. And one of the things that I did is I always ask each grade level to have at least 2 people, or if the whole grade level could come and sit in on the interviews. And that way they could kind of tell right away if that person clicked with their team.
Right.
And that was one of the best things that we did. We asked a lot of different types of questions, even, looking for their empathy, looking for, of course, their knowledge in the subject matter, but a caring. We really wanted to see if they cared for students and not just looked at it as a job. And, that was probably the key ingredient. We had very little turnover from year to year. The hardest thing that I would have to do sometimes, if we didn't have the numbers to make the enrollment for each section, I would have to move a teacher to another grade level, or worst case scenario, another school in Louisville. But, basically it was working together as a team, and I made sure that everybody had the same buy-in.
Yeah. So one of the other things, I think, because of the PTA is very involved.
Oh, extremely.
I don't know what their budget is, but it's extraordinary.
Oh, it is. It was.
And they drive a lot of things, and that happened in middle school and again in high school too. Here at LISD, we're in a fairly affluent neighborhood, right? So you have had experiences where you're not in those neighborhoods.
That's correct.
So what is the difference? And then I'm going to tell you some experiences that I've had. You were part and parcel in getting me into those experiences, but answer that. How is it different, and what does an educator have to do differently in that situation?
Well, a lot of it, what I saw when I was in a school that had different demographics, they seemed to be a little bit more appreciative as far as, we appreciate everything you're doing for our children, and usually always supportive. Not always, but most of the time. In a high socioeconomic area, oftentimes it's like, you got to do more. And then in kindergarten, I always would tell my kindergarten teachers, like Miss Mitchell and Miss Larkin, and that, you have the hardest job, because you're going to be the bearer of bad news to that parent that doesn't think that thinks that their child is the most gifted child in the world. And they're all gifted. They just open up their packages at different times. It's just that they might not be on level, and they had a hard time doing that, because a lot of the expectations are so high, which is great with a high socioeconomic area. And like what I always told my teachers and the parents is that we would want the best for our students, for our own kids. And therefore you just make sure that you give them your best. If you have to be a sage on the stage, do it, whatever it takes. But usually I always had parent support. I remember one time, and I won't use names, but it's different sometimes how parents react to discipline. Oftentimes in a low socio area, they'll say, "Oh yeah, they did that at home." You lower the beam on them and give them the worst punishment you can. And at Heritage, most of the time I would get that, but sometimes it would be like, "Well, what was the other kid doing? My kid didn't do that. It was his fault," or it was the other kid's fault to make my child do that. And that was kind of rare, but I started seeing more and more of that a little bit, where another parent would say, "Oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed that they did that." Like one time, well, I know I won't even use the example because they could figure it out, but they were just, it was just exact opposite. I kind of got off the phone thinking, "Oh my goodness, I just talked to 2 parents. The kids were good friends and got 2 different responses." So that was a little bit and I've seen that change a little bit now. And with, with the technology changes, kindergarten teachers would tell me that, and I saw this before I retired, you'd ask the kids to come over and sit in, let's have story time or center time, and, go over the calendar and the day. And some of the kids kindergartners especially, would say, "No, I want to stay here and work on my computer station," or "Make me." And you're just like, whoa, where did that come from? So a little bit different, but I think that's also generational.
Yes.
You look at your great-grandparents and how afraid they were of their parents and of their teachers, and they wouldn't think of misbehaving.
Right.
And then I look at my own children, and I saw that become a little bit more lax. I saw that even in my own generation. And then now I see it even more laxed, as far as, and I'm not saying that spanking or anything like that, I'm not being an advocate of that. I'm just saying that the respect, you see it in the grocery store with, the screaming kids, and they're not minding their parents. And so it's really hard for the teachers to have, classroom discipline. And that's just, like I said, that's generational.
Yeah.
The first step is to visualize. What you have to do here is define what it is that you want. You need to be able to define it in such a way in your mind's eye that you can feel it, that you can see it, that you can experience it, so that you can bring it into the present. You've got to define your vision so well that you can feel it, you can taste it, you can experience it, you can feel the wind blowing through your hair. As you get clarity on your vision, you need to start articulating what it is that you want to do and sharing that feeling and that vision with others to see if there's anybody out there that shares it. In our case, it was the city government, but we had a Parks Foundation that had already started planning several years before I got involved. After you've figured out how to articulate your vision, you have to find those that actually share your dream as well. A lot of times, in our case, the director of the Parks Department was a great ally in not only packaging and getting the ideas into a format that they could be funded by both the local city and the federal government, but had experience in doing that. So she was a wonderful blessing to us. Her name was Rhoda Savage. So Rhoda, if you see this, thank you. Here we are in one of the entrances to the trail that's been here for quite a long time here in Highland Village. And we're going to go over to the map. You can see that it's multiple miles long, 2.7 miles long. It actually continues on to Doubletree Park now.
So, and that's interesting. So what do you think? And you know, part of what I'm doing with Leadership In and with the growing program that we're on is trying to model potentially conversation, dialogue,
Absolutely.
right? Now, and I've said this with multiple guests, I don't have a lot that I don't think that you and I would disagree on. Hopefully we'll find something so that we can have a real dialogue.
Have a little debate. Yes,
exactly. But, you know, so with what you're telling me, I have seen that too. You know, it's not the tack that we took, because we would take the teacher side 95% of the time because we know our kids quite well. right, Paul? So, but it's not, and what I mean by side is that we're working to the education of a young mind to become a more mature, disciplined, productive mind. Exactly. Right? And so that's a partnership that you have. It's interesting that sometimes that's not and I have a different perspective, because I came from a low socioeconomic status too, right? And so I have aspirations to grow, not just for myself, but my kids can grow to do things more than I did, sort of like what you did and what you're doing for your kids, right? I mean, that's the way that it should be.
And it is.
So then if that doesn't exist though, right? How do we kind of reinstill that kind of thinking? Because I think I put it in here, you know, a thriving community has many legs: parents and citizens. And I said citizens on purpose because we can talk about that. Faith community, schools, you know, chambers and associations. Your associations, I'm in associations. What am I missing? Are there other components to that stool that grows a beautiful mind, a thriving citizen who is a giver, right? And what's missing today?
You know, you and I have talked a little bit about this. It's the kindness and the love, and I just and I wouldn't expect everybody to love their principal or to love their teachers, or I'm not talking about that. They could tell we cared for the kids, even my most worst, you know, my frequent flyers, so to speak. Yeah. I hear from them as much as I do my stellar students.
Well, you got to know them
because I got to know them very well. Exactly. And you could always kind of see sometimes where they might have been missing something at home, or even some had very loving parents and they still had problems. Right. But I think a lot of it, I mean,
is it nature or nurture?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's both, because it's trust too. I mean, you and I we could read the newspaper and pretty much know that everything that we read was pretty accurate with the AP releases, et cetera. And now you're like, nobody trusts even the media, and nobody trusts.
I don't even listen to it.
Exactly. And so it's the whole the world has changed in that regard too. And it's not just the technology aspect either. I have seen that be a factor, even with my own grandkids. I see them giving kids the iPad to keep them quiet or to entertain them. And I'm like, okay, guys, no more screen time, and I see where you use it too. And so the dialogue is different. I used to call it floor time, where parents would sit on the floor and play with their kids and help them with their vocabulary, and kids would color and write. And now you look at their handwriting and it's hardly legible, but they say, oh, well, they're going to be using
they don't even
computer.
teach.
They don't take grades on it anymore. And so that's sad. And spelling's another thing that's gone by the wayside a little bit because of the autocorrect and spell check and everything. So
I personally appreciate that.
Me too, because I'm not a phonetic reader. So I went to a Catholic school for a little bit growing up. It was, my parents needed it for the daycare, and they were kind of ahead of their time in the 60s. You could drop your kids off and then pick them up after work. And so we had Catholicism instead of phonics. So I have very poor phonetic skills. So I'm grateful for spell check as well. But I wish there was just one thing that I could say, this is the reason why. I really can't say. There's just a plethora of things. I mean, church, a lot of people don't go to church anymore. And I'm not saying that that's, the answer, but I think the trust level and just people being mean to one another. I look at these campaigns, and I actually took my landline out because I was so tired of all of the solicitation, the robocalls, etc. And I look at the mudslinging of the campaigns. I'm like, well, who do you believe? That has all changed considerably. So I mean, and I think that filters down to the schools and to the home life as well. And now they have the great big debate, our teachers, the parents, with the CRT and the things that are coming into schools that should or shouldn't. And you're just like, well, let's just get back to the basics and just teach, the basics and not worry about all the different things. But they are a part of the society. And it's sad to see. I feel like teachers nowadays are walking on eggshells as our principals, as far as trying to do what's right. And then you throw in the gun control and everything else. That's very scary.
Yeah, there are a lot of issues.
Oh, it is.
One could be overwhelmed and maybe even concerned. However, what I've chosen to do is to be proactive.
Absolutely.
Right, and to model what I know to be a way of life that is fruitful and that produces strong kids.
That's right.
And I think you're a part of that too.
Oh, yes.
Have been and always will be. So history is actually an interesting way I want to stay positive, right? So I'm searching for language to use here.
I know, and I like you. I choose to be happy.
I did a deep study on CRT, and I know what its roots are.
Right.
Before it was race theory, it was just critical theory.
Right.
Right, and it's bad. It's not good. It's Marxist in its roots. But instead of directly trying to contradict it, let's go to like what you're doing with the Daughters of the American Revolution. Go and celebrate the history that made us great.
Right.
Right. I've done leadership development classes for 23 years. And the school that I went to learn was led by a gentleman named Dick Dooley. He lives in Cape Cod, so hello, Dick. And he's been retired for many years now. But he was friends with Mortimer Adler, who was at Chicago. He was an IT, what we call a chief information officer, before they called them that, for banks in Chicago. So he knew Adler from the school in Chicago. He went to the Aspen Institute, which was kind of a think tank, kind of advanced learning kind of a thing, and then created this leadership forum that I continue to do.
Love it.
A little bit different than we did before because technology has changed and people have changed. We can't spend 2 or 3 days away not thinking about work anymore. You have to do it in smaller bites, stuff like that. But the philosophy is sound, and a lot of what his program was developed on was the great books. So the book that we started out with was How to Read a Book by Mortimer Adler, which introduces syntopical learning, which is where you actually will read at an analytical level, which is the 4th level of reading, 3 or 4 books of the masters of a particular topic, and then you synthesize what their questions are. That's the syntopical.
And then you got the application.
and then you put the application,
Yes.
and then that's where you, as the learner, then get to translate and say, well, let's add this to it, right?
Mhm.
And then it becomes your topic.
Lots of synthesizing.
It's a beautiful
It
thing.
is.
So that's kind of how leadership is, and it's a
It
very
is.
personal thing. So everybody has to go through those kinds of learnings. But I moved from the great books and the great ideas to virtues primarily because it's older,
True.
right? But before we go on to that, let's talk about the great books. Right. So the Western civilization has made possible the advances that we as a society have seen,
Mm-hmm.
right? So with all the problems that we're having, we still have a legacy,
That's true.
a heritage
That's right.
of beauty and of growth. And yeah, there's junk all along the way. Well, that's kind of how humanity has always been,
That's true.
right? So, but then the virtues gives you a way to have a conversation beyond faiths,
Mm-hmm.
beyond culture, because all people groups eventually get down to love is a great thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? Compassion is a way to be joyful and happy and all of those kinds of things. So a lot of the things that our Constitution were built on were sort of at the pinnacle at the time of all of that learning through all of civilization for all time. And those myths became codified. And so there's a beauty in the way that it's created. It's messy, right?
It is.
Politics is nasty.
It is.
And if you go to the 1800s, they were nasty with each other too.
Oh, they were.
Right?
They were. And I was in D.C. I spent 3 months on the Hill after Watergate. And so, believe me, and
so what were you doing there?
I don't like to use the word intern, because, but I was an intern. So it was part of that presidential leadership. We stayed at Marymount College, and we had delegates from all over the United States. And so we had classes on leadership as well as assigned to your state senators. And so it was quite the experience, and it was something that I cherish. I did the Motorola leadership. I've done a lot of the different leadership. Of course, we both talked about the 7 habits, but and I look at the kids because, like you said, the emotional aspect of a child's growth is so vital. I mean, and you think of the physical needs and look at so many kids whose physical needs are not met, where they come to school hungry, and then the schools are now feeding kids breakfast and lunch.
Right.
And we even send backpacks home with food on weekends.
And were we doing that at Heritage?
We were. And
see, I was oblivious to that.
We had a small percentage, but we gave scholarships for Camp Klassen to anybody, like somebody might have lost their job or something and couldn't afford the tuition. But we also helped other schools in Louisville, and that's the beauty of Louisville, is because it is diversified with lots of different socioeconomic areas and students that have needs. We would give we give books to Central every year, and we give scholarships also to other schools for Camp Klassen or even for book supplies. And our PTA was very discreet about handling that. They would come to me sometimes and say, who can't afford their book supplies? And because those, especially some of those supplies the kits that you order at the beginning of school, some of them, we tried to keep them down, but some of them, they were in the 80s. $80
I
worth.
know that.
And when you've got 3 children and you're buying school supplies and you're getting $100 practically every pack, that's $300.
Right.
And so oftentimes I would just give them some names of, I know that this family has had some hardships or whatever, recent divorce and no income on certain things. So we tried to be very discreet about that, but always aware.
The first step is to visualize. What you have to do here is define what it is that you want. You need to be able to define it in such a way in your mind's eye that you can feel it, that you can see it, that you can experience it, so that you can bring it into the present. You've got to define your vision so well that you can feel it, you can taste it, you can experience it, you can feel the wind blowing through your hair. As you get clarity on your vision, You need to start articulating what it is that you want to do and sharing that feeling and that vision with others to see if there's anybody out there that shares it. In our case, it was the city government, but we had a Parks Foundation that had already started planning several years before I got involved. After you've figured out how to articulate your vision, you have to find those that actually share your dream as well. A lot of times, in our case, the director of the Parks Department was a great ally in not only packaging and getting the ideas into a format that they could be funded by both the local city and the federal government, but had experience in doing that. So she was a wonderful blessing to us. Her name was Rhoda Savage. So Rhoda, if you see this, thank you. Here we are in one of the entrances to the trail that's been here for quite a long time here in Highland Village. And we're going to go over to the map. You can see that it's multiple miles long, 2.7 miles long. It actually continues on to Doubletree Park now. The last step along the way, after you've taken the time to be patient and executed, is to go and enjoy your vision. Go out and enjoy what you've created, share it with people, help them to have a better life. After you've then enjoyed it, then it's time to rinse and repeat, and that is to learn and change and grow and vision a new vision, dream a new dream, create something new, and continue the cycle of learning throughout life. So I hope that this series has been interesting to you. It is free of charge on Leadership In as a micro class. And I hope that it's been both entertaining and enjoyable to you, and that you go out and create something new today. Thanks, and have a great day. Bye-bye.
And, you know, looking at a child's emotional needs, sometimes it would break your heart. I mean, I had a student that I was very close to in Tulsa, and the counselor came to me. I was at that time teaching 8th grade, and she says, I have a young lady who's just going to come to school part-time, but I want to tell you her history. And it's been on the news, so I mean, I won't say the names, but her father had raped her. And he told her if she ever told her mom, he would kill her and her mom. And she told, and in 4th grade, this happened to her. And in 5th grade, she told somebody, and he killed her mom. He's in prison. Well, luckily, she was adopted by some other family members. But when I left Tulsa, that girl had came and helped me actually move out my office and stuff, and I've had lunch with her, you know, in Eve as recently as a few years ago. But how do you teach a child who's been through something like that? And I mean, that's probably one of the most awful situations a child that could experience. But it's you have to sometimes, you know, we had one of our students a few years ago that you knew that had, you know, a brain tumor in 5th grade, and we got to the point where we were telling the parents, just live. Don't even worry about going to school in 6th grade. You know, I mean, it was just one of those things where you look at what's more important. And so, I mean, every child has a different story, but you have to, I think if you don't have educators that are empathetic about what's going on in that child's life, you need to know.
Yeah. So, and from that perspective, among all these different groups, then you're a connector that kind of helps coordinate help to those that need it.
Oh, yes. I look at, for, you know, any educator that has a heart and caring nature. I mean, like I said, we always said that Heritage felt like family, and we still feel that way. I mean, Toby's good about calling me if somebody's lost a parent or whatever. And I know when I lost, that was one of the reasons I retired so early. I probably made a mistake of retiring too early because I love my job and I had a great school, great community, great teachers. My mom died of cancer, and she died quickly. And in Oklahoma City, I still had like 12 teachers who took off, and Betty Jackson sang at the funeral, but drove up to Oklahoma City for the day and back for the funeral. Did the same thing 88 days later when I lost my dad. And by losing both of your parents who you love dearly so quickly, I just thought, well, you know, there's more to life. I don't want to die at my job, and I might as well live. And I had a grandson that was just born, and so that was one of the reasons why I retired and I did help his first year of life with them a lot. But it was important. But you know, you just kind of look at the overall picture and what's most important in life. But I did really look for teachers that cared about students, and we did Me in the Bags. This is so crazy, but I did this even in middle school at Union. And I was real tickled. My granddaughter's a fourth grader, was doing it at South Lake just when the first started with school. But the first day of school, I would bring about 4 items that told about myself personally and shared it with the kids. And I said, now your first homework assignment is you have to bring yourself in a bag. We called it Me in the Bag tomorrow. And we want to learn about each and every one of you. And those kids, it was, of course, in 8th grade, I was like, oh my gosh, I hope they don't bring a roach clip or something that is inappropriate, you know. But I'm telling you, I'll never forget this one. And I've really tried to find him on Facebook because I've stayed connected with a lot of my students. Some are in their 50s, and because I was only 10 years older than my 6th graders and when I first started.
Right.
But this young man, I'll tell you this story real quick. His name was Stephen, and he volunteered first. He had a grocery bag of stuff. I was like, oh my gosh, he brought more than 4 items, but you know, I wasn't going to say anything. And he gets up there and he starts pulling out all of these model airplanes, and he starts to talk. He goes, my name is Stephen, and I want to be an airplane pilot. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I didn't know he had a speech impediment. And here he is talking, and you could hear a couple of snickers. And of course, I was giving these dirty looks, and he just was fabulous and went on and talked about wanting to be an airline pilot. I was writing a note already, A+. I'm so proud of your, you know, of your determination and et cetera. And anyhow, then after he said all this, and he goes, and another thing, I don't like it when people make fun of the way I talk. And I was like, oh my gosh, a pin could drop with these 8th graders. And he went on to say that he had been born deaf and that he had a cochlea transplant. He'd had 11 surgeries. He was only 13, and he'd had 11 surgeries in his life, major surgeries on his ears and his hearing. And it was just amazing. And I was just so proud of him telling the class, and we were like a family and really close. And about 2 months later, of course, this was a real junior high. There was some 9th grade boys, and they were walking behind Stephen, and they were in their letter jackets. And Stephen played football. He was a big boy too, and they're going making fun. And this little girl, I'm friends with her on Facebook. I just admired her so much. Her name's Jessica. She went up to those 9th grade boys and said, "Look, don't you make fun of Stephen. He has had 11 surgeries in his life. He was born that way." And I mean, she just gave him the right act. And I was about to intervene because it was a form of bullying. And boy, that girl took care of it. But I just share that story because it shows that when you're close, and it's like when teachers greet every child coming in the door, you're welcome and you're wanted to be there, and they know that. I had a 6th grader one time, he lives in New York City now, and he came up to me, he says, Miss Nikkel, you really like your job, don't you? And I said, yes, I sure do, Keith. And he goes, well, I knew you did because Mrs. So-and-so I had last year, she did not like her job. And I mean, that was a 5th grader with his insight, but they have to know that you want to be there and that you love them, and that maybe not love, but you care for them. You
Definitely.
know? So I didn't need to go on that. So.
No, it's all good. So I'm welling up with pride for what you are and what you do, but I also love that myself, right? So when I basically go through life, and as the kids go through different places, then I put myself in where they're going to be.
Absolutely.
Right? Like with Cub Scouts when we were there at Heritage, and then at Crossroads Bible Church, I was doing music, you know, so it was the worship for the kids. Right. And one of the ladies that was there said, the difference between what you do and what most other people is that you actually expect them to learn how to sing. Exactly. And I'm like, well, yeah, because everybody can learn how to sing. You know, it's like you can teach them parts, and they can actually do it. You did it. I mean, it was great. And there we had a phenomenal musical program. I can't remember the name of the guy anymore, but we had all kinds of students who were playing drums or keyboards or bass or whatever. So when I would show up as the leader, I would have my music, and I never knew who I was going to get. Wow. Right. So you had to get that going, and then the kids would come in. It was a blast. I love it. But that expectation of excellence is the thing I think that makes a difference. And then if you believe in
Mhm.
each child that they can
Absolutely.
do it,
Absolutely.
or young adult or adult,
Exactly.
that and seeing them get it
Hmm.
is the thing then that drives us,
Oh
right?
yeah. And I asked that of my teachers in some of our service, staff development is one time I asked them, write down all the teachers who made an impact in your life.
Hmm.
And boy, it's usually the common thread is that they believed in me. They
Hmm.
saw something in me that nobody else saw, just like that
Or
elder.
that I didn't even know I
Right.
had.
Like that
Yeah.
elder saw in you.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was at this Catholic school, I went in the middle of the year. I came from public to private, and they were an all day kindergarten, and I was just a half a day. They were already reading.
Mm.
And I was put on an Academy Award performance to Sister Jude that I didn't feel good when
Yeah.
they were starting to read, and she would let me go lay down on a cot. And that mean old principal, Sister Bernadette, would say, Belinda, you're not sick. You get it back in there and you learn to read. She knew what I was doing.
Yeah.
And I was grateful for that. But I remember very, very shy and wouldn't talk. And like I said, I was intimidated that they were further ahead of me. I caught up in first grade. It was no big deal. But then they asked me to be in their play. The only first grader, I got to be the little angel. And they saw something in me that nobody else saw.
Right.
Because like I said, I was very shy. It was a new school. And they did that. And I think that really, and they even for kindergarten, I was the MC, which was crazy because I was so quiet. But I don't know if it was mine because I could use big words or something in kindergarten, but my parents kept the little speech and I had to memorize it. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It was crazy. But so I am always grateful for those teachers who saw something in me.
Yeah.
And that's what you want to find every teacher is that they can find something good in every child and
Yeah.
make them believe in themselves.
So the other thing that is impressive to me is that not only have you done that, but you keep up with with these kids,
Oh,
right? Now I know that you can't keep up with everybody, but
it's
there
fun.
are those that you do. So let me lay a scenario out for you, and it's one that I'm trying to figure out how to solve for myself,
Sure.
right, and for society, because I'm a giver by nature, and I want to make an impact.
You do.
So a friend of mine who is at the local Jewish congregation is one of my students from probably 15 years ago when he was a director at Radio Shack. He now runs the office there at the synagogue. But he contacted me, he said, hey, I've got this young man who has just graduated from college. He's having a heck of a time trying to find a job. It's in technology. You're still more, more active than I am and know things more. Can you meet with him? I'm like, yeah. About the same time, I had a get together with another friend of mine here in Highland Village area. And one of his friends came to that get together and he said, hey, my son is about 4 years out of college and he's having a heck of time figuring out what to do and how to do it. So I went to lunch with the four of them.
Love it.
Right. To see how I could help.
Yeah.
And it's something that I've seen in my my own experience in dealing with young people as well, that they're at some level there's a lack of passion or hope for the future or knowledge about how to apply themselves in this world. And it's different than my generation, right? So I was born in December 31st of 64. So I was right on the edge of baby boomer and the next generation, probably more like the next generation, but still I have some of the proclivities of the older one. So there are generational differences, right? And I teach strength, so I know that there are personality differences. So the nurture nature thing is a very important part, but people can rise above any circumstance. Absolutely. Right, by nature. But by and large, there's a lot of people that are just kind of floating. They don't know where to go and what to do. Many of them have a faith background, right? So I'm thinking through the stools. Right. They went to good schools. Right. They have a good family. They have, they know, I think, the things that your program would have taught them as a young person, and they've progressed through life, but they're still listless and not exactly knowing where to go. So putting on your knowledge of everything that you've seen, what are the things that we need to do to help them to thrive? What And this can be an ongoing conversation.
Oh,
We don't
yeah.
have to answer it all now.
No, because it's one of those, I used to
You
pose
see
that
it,
great,
first of all?
yes. And I would pose that question oftentimes to my students. I said, hey, if I had a student from, let's say, with a degree from the University of Oklahoma,
Right.
and one
Imagine
from
that.
Harvard, and I'm the president of a bank, and I hire them both, and I give them both the scenario of, we've got a big customer coming in on Monday. I want you to come up with the proposal on this weekend, and we'll see which one will get to present it to the customer. The kid from OU works all weekend, and he's got a great presentation, and it's just unbelievable. And then the guy from Harvard, he doesn't have anything written down. He's got all his ideas in his head, and he's going to give him a selling point because he's from Harvard.
Right.
Who am I going to choose to present that to the customer?
Right.
And even if they don't like OU, they'll usually say, well, I would pick the person from OU who worked.
Person who prepared.
Prepared, exactly. So I kind of share that story because I feel like it's work ethics. I think it's determination, desire. There's a lot of people with a zillion degrees that can't work or get along with people.
Right.
And I'm not saying that they can't get along with people. It's just, sometimes it's just they've got to find their purpose, and they've got to find their own confidence too, to do the job. And I think that's part of the problem. I mean, now what are we in with the Great Resignation? Nobody wants to work.
Right.
and
that seems to be generational.
It is generational. And I think that it's also, like I said, they've got to have that desire, put the fire under them. And I mean, Betty Jackson's a good example. A lot of people didn't want to look at Betty, and our district at that time were allowing me to go up to Oklahoma, and I would recruit at job fairs. And that's how I found Joyce Hines and Betty Jackson. Okay. They had retired from the Oklahoma system, and they wanted to go down to Texas because, for one thing, you could just work for 5 years, and they had grandkids down here, and you could be, at that time, you only had to work 5 years to be vested. Now it's 10. And then you could get a second retirement and make like a minimum of $10,000 more a year. Is what, I mean, my Oklahoma friends would say, don't even show them that pay scale at Louisville, And so Betty had just retired from Wynnewood, and her husband, my dad knew Mr. Jackson Galen, and he was a high school principal there. Okay. And he had had enough, and he was just ready to rest, and he wanted to play golf, and he was the marshal there at Dallas at the Cowboys golf course there in Grapevine.
Oh, was he really?
And he's such a card, such a personality, big personality. And Betty felt like she was only, at that time, I think she was only in her early 50s, and she still felt like she had a lot more teaching in her. And I knew I wanted to hire her. Now, the district, they allowed me to do that because she came in at the top of the scale, with all that experience, as that's how they pay teachers, is by their experience. And so I was really fortunate to get that good of a teacher. But let me tell you, Betty Jackson could work circles around some of my just out of college. But she was also a fabulous mentor to those just out of college.
Sure.
And so you kind of look at pairing kids, maybe that don't have the drive, with somebody like a Betty Jackson or somebody in the corporate world who you want them to mentor with. I think that's really very valuable. And I think it's also good to have a nice mix of experience and new blood as well.
Sure.
So I think that's important with the younger people to see that a little bit, and to see how the old school, so to speak, watch a person that gets to work early every day or stays late or gives it 110%. And when others are saying, do we have to do that?
Right.
And so I think that's important.
Well, she gave almost 200% every year.
She did, and she still does.
With all the different programs that she did in addition to the regular curricula.
Oh, exactly.
But I think those are powerful.
Absolutely.
Right? All of the song, the musicals that she did.
Exactly.
We still remember it. And matter of fact, in the conversation that I had with Brad, we talked about Betty Jackson.
I remember.
Yeah. All right. So we've talked a little bit about this, but if there's one attitude in society today that you could change, you could have your magic wand and say, stop doing that, what would it be? And you don't have to limit it to one if there's more than that.
It's the attitudes, people being kind to one another. I always believe that happiness begins with gratitude. And I think we should all be grateful that we are here on this earth and be thankful for the moments. And, when I'm driving along and I do, my foot can be a little heavy sometimes, but if somebody flips me off or something, heaven forbid, I just laugh it off. I just start laughing. I think there's no sense in getting upset over road rage, and I see people do that. And I'm thinking, why are they so unhappy? Why are they so upset? So I have learned just to let things roll off, and I would love to see our society be kinder to one another, help one another, be happy. I always would say a smile costs nothing to give. And usually when you smile at somebody, they'll smile back. I know we've talked about travels, and I made it a game when I was in Russia to smile and see if I could get a smile back. And they're just so gloomy. And I'm just like, finally, I was talking to my friend. I said, I can't get anybody to smile. And this one lady, we were going up an escalator the other way, and I think she understood enough English, and she smiled back because I think she knew what I was trying to do, But when you go to Thailand and everybody's just so smiling and thankful, and so it is a society issue too.
Sure. Well, even here, I mean, when we moved back to Texas from California, we were blown away, literally, by the people in the convenience stores that would say hello as you walked in.
Exactly, so friendly.
Happy to see you and all that stuff.
Exactly. You hear it all the time from the north and from the west. They're like, that's one of the things that David and I always liked about Oklahoma and Texas. Those are two of the states we wanted to raise our children in. Good people, as a whole.
Definitely. Yeah, I actually did a class for the chief information officer at the state of Oklahoma, and got to spend a couple of days in Oklahoma City, go to the rodeo there.
Oh, cool.
Or was it rodeo or
we used to host the National Finals Rodeo. We used to go to that every year, but they do still have some PBR and other rodeos.
Yeah, it's fun. I like going there. And the new river walk that they created.
It's fabulous.
Pretty phenomenal.
And that's what I'm really proud of. You look at how the hardships that Oklahoma endured. Everybody thinks of Grapes of Wrath. Mm-hmm. And they have more man-made lakes, I think, than any other state. They have a lot of shoreline. They even passed Minnesota at one time, but then I think it's in the top 5, which you wouldn't think. Texas even buys water from Broken Bow, which is crazy, but that's one of the reservoirs. But it's just, I'm proud of the leadership, because in Oklahoma City, when I was growing up, Tulsa was really passing it as far as progressiveness. They always compared Tulsa to Dallas and Oklahoma City to Fort Worth. And the mayor and the leaders said, well, let's do something. And so they did a couple of things. They rerouted the Canadian River, which was dried up half the time. And they knew they could never be another San Antonio, but they did make Bricktown kind of into the West End and stuff. And it really was vibrant. And I've had friends that invite me back to the Thunder games, and they got the Oklahoma City Thunder, because the man who owned it, Mr. Bennett, he owns the Sonic. Owns Sonic. Got it. At drive-in, and it's corporates in Oklahoma City. He owned the Seattle Sonics, and the story is he wanted Oklahoma City to have a basketball team, a professional, because Oklahoma doesn't have a professional anything. And so, anyway, at that time it was Katrina, and the New Orleans Saints, not the Saints, but the Jazz, they couldn't play in New Orleans, so they allowed them to go to Oklahoma City, and they showed that Oklahoma City could fill the arena in a minute. They had some of the highest attendance rates. So they allowed him to bring his team, the Seattle Sonics, to Oklahoma City. Well, they wouldn't let him keep the name Sonic, which was, of course, his Sonic drive-in. And so anyhow, they did choose the Thunder, but he still is the owner. But it's a cool story, and it's just one of those, again, of perseverance and of seeing, it's like I said, seeing Oklahoma City be vibrant is
loving your hometown
awesome. Absolutely.
Doing something with it.
Exactly.
That's awesome. So I think we've gone through some really exciting conversation. Thank you very much for that. I'm going to read the introduction of who the Daughters of the American Revolution is, and then just ask you about what your involvement with it is, and why you think it's important for people to look at our history and that kind of thing. So who are we? The Daughters of the Revolution was founded in 1890 and headquartered in Washington, D.C. as a nonprofit, non-political volunteer women's services organization dedicated to promoting patriotism, preserving American history, and securing America's future through better education for children. I love that. DAR members volunteer millions of service hours annually in their local communities, including supporting active duty military personnel and assisting veteran patients, awarding thousands of dollars in scholarships and financial aid each year to students, and supporting schools for underserved children with annual donations exceeding $1 million. One of the most inclusive genealogical societies in the country, DAR boasts 190,000 members in 3,000 chapters across the United States and internationally. Any woman 18 years or older, regardless of race, religion, or ethnic background, can prove lineal descent from a patriot of the American Revolution, is eligible for membership. Encompassing an entire downtown city block, DAR National Headquarters houses one of the nation's premier genealogical libraries, one of the foremost collections of pre-industrial American decorative arts, Washington's largest concert hall, and an extensive collection of early American manuscripts and imprints. So that's who they are at a national level. I was excited to see that you were part of it. I really don't know much about it, but I figured if you're a part of it, it's pretty awesome. So what do you guys do here locally?
Sure.
And how would somebody get involved with that?
Well, when I retired, that was one of the first things that I did was I got into genealogy, and thankfully, Dr. Julie Sherman, who is with the Grapevine, our chapter is the Captain Molly Corbin chapter.
Okay.
And she helped me. I had always heard we had family Bibles that we were related to Daniel Boone. Didn't think it was a cousin or an uncle. We really didn't know. And so one of my cousins also got into genealogy and said, well, I think he might be our grandfather. We were like, oh. And so I went to Dr. Julie and showed her what I had. And she said, I think we can prove this. And so I had to get probate records from Nathaniel Boone, his son, which is grandfather, and found out he was my great-grandfather times 6 generations. And so I got probate records, death records, birth certificate records, and proved it. And when you do that with the American Revolution, you find your patriot and you trace it all the way back to your lineage, then they give you a number. And they, first of all, they have all these genealogists there at the Hall of Constitution that verify your records. And they check it. I mean, they check the court records, they check everything. And once you have a number and are a member of the Daughters of the American Revolution, then all of your ancestors following, they keep those records at the Constitutional Hall. And so it's preserved. And so now my grandchildren, their grandchildren, can just use that number, and they don't have to go back and do all the paperwork. They just connect it to that number. So it's a very worthwhile organization. We every Memorial Day we do a ceremony at Bluebonnet Cemetery there in Colleyville, and we also lay wreaths on veterans' graves, and we do lots of volunteering. One of our favorite things that we did was a sip and snip, where you snip and make those flannel blankets and tie the knots, and we did that and took hundreds of blankets down to the veterans there in Dallas. And we go into schools and teach them about patriots and, of course, the scholarships. But it's a very worthwhile organization. We give care packages to our firemen in our cities that, do so much for us. And it's a very worthwhile organization. I need to be more involved. We always send a nice delegation to D.C. every year, and they wear all of these badges with all these buttons and stuff, and I'm not as involved as some of the people in my chapter, so I have a long way to go, and I'm still learning, but it's a very, very worthwhile organization.
Very cool. Well, I'm glad to learn about it, and I appreciate you continuing to learn too.
Sure.
Which is a great thing in life.
You bet.
Well, this has been a fascinating conversation.
Oh, thank you.
I knew it would.
Boring.
I knew no. I knew it would be. It was exactly what I was hoping that it would be, and we went where I wanted to go. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about that we didn't?
No, I'm just honored. I'm proud that we have all kept our relationship going. And I never liked Facebook when I was a principal. I never was on it because I would even get on. I was the Facebook police. I would get on to teachers like, you can't be on this during work. And then when I got on it, I reconnected with a lot of former students and as well as the parents. And it's maintained that good relationship through that. So I'm very grateful. I love keeping up with my students. And where all they went. And I've tried to go to several of their graduations. And we had Miss Jackson's granddaughter just got her acceptance into OU. And so we had to get together and welcome
awesome.
and you know, it was a little welcome box. And of course we had to have signs, and Betty made signs. And but it was really cool. McKenna started there. In fact, McKenna was a kindergartner when I retired, but several of her fifth grade teachers, kindergarten teachers, the counselor all came, and then some of the Marcus and Briar Hill teachers were there. So I love our community, how we support one another. And unfortunately, whether it's good times or bad times, we're there for each other. And this is, I wouldn't trade it. If I had it to do over again, I would have moved to this area. But at that time when we were moving, everybody said go to Plano or wherever, and we didn't know.
Yeah. And there was no Blue Ribbon School here.
There wasn't a Blue Ribbon School at that time.
You
exactly.
hadn't
We had to
landed.
make it. We had to do it. We did.
All right.
And what's neat is Marcus is one as well.
Oh yeah. Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Dr. Larry Siegler went through that, and he got it. I remember it was really exciting because that way we had Heritage and then Marcus.
Yeah, I think it's
Highland Village is
still
too.
in the top 50 or so schools in the country.
It is.
So yeah, we're very blessed to be here. Well, thank you very much for coming out. It was a pleasure to get to know you better and to catch up on all the great things you're doing. We'll see you soon.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.